Hello and welcome to South Asia Focus. I am Smita Prakash. This week we have with us Dr. Rajeshwari Rajagopalan, Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation in New Delhi and an expert on South Asian affairs. We will be speaking to her about the future of Afghanistan under a new president and also focus on President Ghani's recent visit to China.
In his first visit abroad as President of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani visited Beijing earlier this week and met Chinese President Xi Jinping. Ghani promised to help China combat Islamist militants. The two sides also said in a joint statement that China would give 2 billion yuan, that is $327 million to Afghanistan till 2017. China would also be helping guide 3,000 Afghan professionals over the next 5 years. Ghani also reiterated Afghanistan's old demand, urging China to open the Wakhan Pass connecting the two nations, through which Kabul hopes to see arrival of Chinese development. China has been resisting, fearing turmoil will spread into Xinjiang region.
Thank you for speaking with us, Dr. Rajagopalan.
Thank you.
President Ghani, now he decided to visit China. The first visit of a head of state or head of government is always very important. It is symbolic. It sends out signals immediately. When Prime Minister Modi took office, his first visit was to Bhutan. Straight away signals that the neighborhood is important. Now, why did President Ghani choose Afghanistan? Why not India? Why not Pakistan? And why not the US?
I think again, like you said, it symbolizes, it determines the course of action in terms of what are the foreign policy directions, what are the economic policy directions of that particular country. And Afghanistan is obviously going through a very important phase, just as the NATO forces are heading out and so on and so forth. There are important developments taking place. You had the two major agreements signed just 2 days ago, one with the US, the BSA security agreement, as well as with the NATO forces. A similar agreement has been signed so that forces will continue to stay on in Afghanistan for at least another 2-3 years and so on and so forth. So there is one set of issues that the security is important, but I think the most important challenge is going to be, as the security forces withdraw in the next 1 or 2 years' time, the aid from external sources will also dry up in Afghanistan. So in a sense, today's economy is hugely dependent on the foreign aid that Afghanistan is receiving.
And China has promised $327 million
exactly.
Grant for the next 3 years.
Exactly. So economic revamping of the economy is a major aspect, a major focus for the new government, whether it is Ghani or Abdullah. For both the set of leaders for the national unity government, it is going to be the focus. And obviously, the Chinese are going to be able to pump in a lot of money into the Afghanistan economy. As such, you had one of the largest donors in terms of the mining, extracting the mines and so on and so forth, the natural resources out of Afghanistan. China has played a huge role. So I think they are looking at the Chinese to pump in a lot more money in the foreseeable future, in the coming months and the coming years actually. So I think that's one of the major focus areas. And also it does symbolize a bit of some bit of disappointment towards India in a sense. They have not.
Yeah, did Afghanistan and the rest of the world really expect India to play a larger role once the 2014 pullback had happened, so drawdown had happened. So it was this expectation that India would step into that role.
Yes.
But clearly China is getting into that vacuum that's going to happen.
Exactly. India is losing out that critical opportunity that was given to India to kind of shape the Afghanistan economy, Afghanistan politics, Afghanistan's security in a sense, in a big way. So there is disappointment in Kabul about India, what it can expect from India, whether it is, for instance, military hardware. Not anything major really. None of the major big systems are being asked. Even small arms and light weapons have been asked from India. But again, India has not really stepped up in meeting the demands of the Afghan security forces.
So what you're telling me is that China is not just going to be involved in development activity. There is a security element also involved in this. There's a political involvement also. It's not just for oil and natural gas. It's not just for mining. Yes. It's going to be more than that.
Obviously, the biggest focus is going to be on extracting the natural resources out of China. And China goes everywhere looking at if there is a resource out there, China is there too. I think that's the way Chinese work.
But they held back, isn't it, when their workers were
yeah,
attacked
exactly.
by the
security,
Taliban?
Security is an important aspect also, given that the security of their own people working out in some of the mines and so on and so forth. And security is important also from another angle for China.
The Uyghurs.
The Xinjiang, exactly, the Xinjiang problem. So given that Xinjiang problem and how Pakistan may come to become the kind of broker between the Afghan Taliban as well as the Xinjiang, so to bring some sort of sanity under control situation in Xinjiang back home, I think again China has a security angle looking at Afghanistan. So China has a multiple front, and also it's to be remembered that for instance, on the diplomatic and political side, the US and the Chinese have been collaborating, and they have been doing training and diplomatic exercises and training in Washington DC.
Yeah, it was surprising to see that. I think it was the first time that the US State Department came out in support of China playing a larger role in Afghanistan. That kind of took everybody by surprise.
Yeah, in a sense, but the two great powers are coming together to kind of shape up the things.
They're not competing for interests in Afghanistan.
Exactly, because I think given at least Obama's orientation, broad foreign policy orientation, he's trying to kind of look back, step back from the scene, pull back the forces, and have a standoffish kind of approach towards Afghanistan. Because
so what is this? This is outsourcing to China?
Some sort of outsourcing, you can say, in a sense. And the Chinese have an interest primarily because of the economic thing, but also the security-driven approach is also driving the Chinese towards Afghanistan. And also, there has been disappointment even for the Americans that India has not really stepped up to meet the requirements from the Afghan side, in a sense. But on the other hand, even President Ghani seemed to be under the influence of Pakistan a bit, that if India is to play a larger role, there could be further stemming up the big problem coming from Pakistan and so on and so forth. So
this is what India feared, isn't it?
India always
with
feared
that Ghani at the helm, that the nexus between Pakistan and Afghanistan is going to expand, but it's expanded with this with China in the picture.
Exactly, and even though there was some expectation that Abdullah might be able to balance that off, but I think Abdullah is in a second position in a sense, so he's not able to exercise all that veto on how the
How does this balance of power work in Afghanistan with Abdullah as CEO and Ghani as president? Who decides on foreign policy, or is there like some kind of a consensus that the two arrive? How does it work?
Some sort of consensus need to be arrived, and also there's a council of ministers out there. They need to come to some sort of consensus, but I think the president being the more powerful person within the system, in a sense, I think the President Ghani is going to have a much bigger say in how things are going to be worked out. Initially, there was a lot of talk about how Ghani may be focusing more on the economic and financial aspects of it, and the foreign policy may be left more to Abdullah, but I don't think that's the way things are working out. You have the Council of Ministers and the Ghani at the helm of affairs in terms of how the foreign policy directions and broad policy directions are going to be done, and essentially Abdullah is meant to implement or execute some of these decisions taken together in the Council of Ministers, in a sense.
Okay, just before elections took place, there were a number of articles written, and several think tanks in America said that the great game in Afghanistan is now, it's coming to a head, and Afghanistan will become a virtual war zone for India and Pakistan to play their war in Afghanistan. So to that effect, do you think that those articles, those think tanks who were espousing this cause, they have been successful in doing that, and because of that China has moved in or has been asked to move in?
I think China, in any case, was because they have a larger economy, and their economic growth rate has been very, very phenomenal in a sense. So they have the larger kitty in a sense to pitch into, whether it is Afghanistan or Latin America or Africa in a sense. So they have the larger economic kitty. So they are in a position to influence affairs in other countries also in a much better way than, in a more effective manner than India.
But then India's role in Afghanistan, doesn't it have a better track record as compared to China?
It does, but at the same time, now that the external, the NATO forces and other forces, Western forces are moving out, the main focus is to create employment, revive the economy that is going to be self-sustaining instead of just being relying on the foreign aid and so on and so forth. Agricultural sector, modernizing of the agricultural sector, I think that's going to be again another important aspect of it, for all of which you need a lot of money, a lot of funding coming from somewhere or the other. And until the Western forces are there for the next 1 or 2 years or 3 years maximum, some of this aid could be coming in. But Afghanistan has to plan their future in a slightly more longer term in a sense. So they can't be just looking at the next 1 year, 2 year time frame in a sense. So they might have to look at long term funding opportunities, and for which China is a very good opportunity at this stage. So
okay, let me move to the security aspect. We did touch upon that earlier in the when we were talking. Now the Al Qaeda has also issued a threat for the jihad. The jihad in South Asia to go beyond and even into China, something like what the ISIS had also said. How much is this affecting China's decision to play a major role in Afghanistan?
Obviously, Xinjiang issue has always prominently figured in China's debate, and I was in Shanghai for about 10 days in the last about a week ago. This is one thing that is coming up back and again in the debates about how the Xinjiang problem might spread to larger in the larger context within the country itself, but also how there's those across the board linkages from whether it is
Eastern Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Exactly. All those linkages might come to harm their own interests. So bringing some sort of control, some sort of things under control in a sense is an important aspect for China, and I think the managing the Xinjiang problem will continue to debate for. If you look at the Chinese defense budgets, for instance, the internal security budgets have been going up more than the defense budgets in the last 3-4 years. So that clearly shows that the internal security dynamics are becoming much more important for them, rather than the external elements of worry and concern in a sense.
Do you see China and India competing for interests, whether security, whether for development activity, whether for trade or for any other purpose in Afghanistan?
In Afghanistan, I think we may not be in a big way there. There were a lot of expectation that India would also pitch in a big way. But given that the Western forces are moving out, I think we ourselves aren't sure of how much we want to continue in Afghanistan.
That was the earlier administration in India. What about the new administration?
The new administration, again, you haven't seen a very different policy approach, at least as of now. We should have acted on it even 3 months back, as soon as the government came into force, took the office.
The National Security Advisor was in Kabul recently, Indian National Security Advisor. Any greater role for India envisaged?
But I don't think anything is really coming out at this stage, and at best we will be willing to do more training for Afghan National Security Forces, both the military as well as the police forces back at home here in a sense. So we are not going to be putting the soldiers out there, putting our military force out there in Afghanistan to secure the situation in a sense. What we are willing to do is get those Afghan security forces who need training back home in bigger numbers, have a higher representation of the Afghan security forces in our national defense establishments for training and so on and so forth.
Actually, both China and India not quite sure what their long-term plans are in Afghanistan?
Yes.
Right.
In some sense, you can say that, although the long-term interests in terms of the economic resources and the natural resources, mining and other such activities, is very important for China.
Okay. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thank you very much.